Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2025 ISBI. We'll be starting our past, present, future panel here in a few minutes, and these guys got some awesome stories about the old days of farming and some great perspectives on today, so if you could make your way over, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and have our starting kickoff here. If you didn't grab a cup of coffee, well, that's too darn bad because we're starting now. So welcome to the Sugarbeets then, now, and the future. I myself am Beet Farmin Mitch. So I'm a family farmer here in the Red River Valley, grow for American Crystal, 6th generation farmer. I farm with my brothers, my dad, and my uncle. So we've been around, good old family farm. But I'm also a 1st generation YouTuber, so I have a YouTube channel that kind of shows off farming and specifically sugar beets, so be sure to check that out. And I've been blessed with the opportunity to be able to moderate this panel today. So with that, this panel, a big purpose of this is to really just take a moment. This is a big milestone moment for ISBI and for sugar beets. This is a time where we're gonna kind of listen to the generations of the past and remember these stories and take them to heart. So with that, if you guys could introduce yourselves starting here, tell us your name, a little bit about yourself, and we'll begin.
My name is Alan Dragseth. I farmed a mile and a half north of Eldred, Minnesota, which is just between Climax and Crookston. I moved to Crookston 10 years ago, so now I'm a city slicker, and this was our 100th year of having beets on our farm, so my dad and grandpa started back in the early 20s, and we formed a sugar beet museum in Crookston. I invite you to, if you haven't been there, to stop by. And well, we got the booth over here, but we've got lots more equipment at the museum, and in the second weekend of September, we harvest sugar beets with these old vintage pieces of equipment. I guess that's it.
I'm Delano Thorson, and I farm over by Eldred also. And we started the sugar beets in 1951, and things were really different, really different. Because in 1951, you could not get a contract from American Crystal unless you had provisions to have a mechanical harvester. Because in 1950, on the 1st of November, just about all the sugar beets were still in the ground. And the only sugar beets that were out by the 1st of November was the ones that the truck drivers stopped, because the migrant labor didn't show up, and like they always did before. So American Crystal had to do something, so they made provisions that you can't get a contract unless you have made arrangements to mechanical harvest. Well, anyhow, by the time we were going to buy a harvester, my dad was a John Deere guy. Everything had to be John Deere. And John Deere was just coming out with a new 2-row. Went in to get a new John Deere beet harvester because we were going to start the sugar beets. Well, lo and behold, they were all sold out. They were getting 16 of them in Grand Forks, and all the 16 were gone. So he had to lower the things a little bit, had to buy a McCormick Deering. So he bought a new M and a single row harvester with the dealer's provision that he could cancel out if he could get a John Deere. Well, lo and behold, when John Deere found out we were buying international, the 17th one showed up in Grand Forks. So we've been at it for a while. Go ahead.
And I'm Roger Odegaard from Crookston, and I'm a retired farmer. And I guess we're going to talk about old times, and I'm not that old yet.
Well, that's kind of interesting, Roger. You're not that old yet. Al Kapna, I spent 26 years extension sugar beets for NDSU and University of Minnesota. And then I spent 17 years the head agronomist at American Crystal. After I retired there 11 years ago, I did a little consulting in Ukraine and Russia, but that's kind of dried up. And this is one of the few groups that I'm the youngest guy in.
There you go. So we got Alan, we got Delano, we got Roger, and we got Al. First off, let's just take a moment to kind of look back on the ISBI. Where did this show start? Could you, Al, please give us a quick, brief history of how the ISBI started and kind of its initial purpose?
Well, the show originally started as a symposium at the University of Minnesota Crookston in the Keeley Auditorium. And Bernie Youngquist was one of the ringleaders of getting that going, along with some of these growers in that Crookston area. After that, it morphed into a equipment show at the Winter Show building in Crookston as well. And from there, we used to have a show set up on Monday in West Fargo at the fairgrounds, have the show on Tuesday, move everything to Crookston on Wednesday, have the show in Crookston on Thursday, and that was one irate group of exhibitors after doing a week like that. And then eventually it came to be held in the Alara Center and the Fargo Dome.
So what were some of the agricultural seminars on back in the day? And just to kind of open this up to the farmers here too, what were some of your agronomic struggles back when you were younger? What were kind of some of the big problems that you remember?
I remember Olaf Sorny was one of the first guys that presented stuff at the early seminars, and he was studying hail damage to sugar beets, and he was taking a scissor and cutting a fourth out of a leaf and cutting a leaf in half and cutting 3/4 of the leaf, and that was to demonstrate what hail damage would do to sugar beets. Well, in my opinion, hail damages the crown more than it does the leaves, but that was one of the early programs I remember him presenting.
And I think most of the presenters were from the University of Minnesota or from Extension. That was from, well, I went to the Northwest School of Agriculture. The teachers out there were all had doctor's degrees and did research, and so they showed and talked about what they did in the summertime with sugar beets.
Sugar beets was a lot different plant back in the early 50s. I don't think any of the younger guys have any clue what the difference is between monogerm and multi-germ seed is. And my dad was the one that got the very first 75 pounds of monogerm seed in Crookston. And we were always used to planting 7 pounds to the acre, driving 2 miles an hour with the beet drill. And we had that in turn turned out to be a very heavy stand some years. So what did we do? We cross-cultivated, and we were on 20-inch rows in those days. And if we could count down the row after we cross-cultivated and had 70 blocks, that was enough of a stand. If you couldn't make the 70 blocks, you went home, tore your tractor and your cultivator all down, changed the row spacing. Can you imagine doing that nowadays, changing row spacing? And so that's the way it was. But we had, and the main thing at that time was good migrant labor. There wasn't anything better for the sugar beet business than good migrant labor. We were very fortunate. We had the nicest family. We had 5 houses on the farm, and they lived just single bedroom homes. They all lived in there. And to this day, some of that family we had back in those days are my Facebook friends on Facebook.
Probably should do a little more explaining of multi-germ and monogerm. The early seed, several plants would come up from each seed, and then they'd have to crawl along on their hands and knees. And my mother tells me of doing it. They grab one plant and then pick out the best looking plant and then dig the others away and then crawl up to the next. And then when they came with monogerm seed, only one plant came up from the seed, and eventually now we've gotten this planting to stand and not even thinning. A lot of the young guys I found out don't even know what these thinners are because we quit using them about 30 years ago or so.
I remember when I started in 1975, they put me on the governor's council for farm labor, and there were over 15,000 migrants working in the Red River Valley in 1975 on virtually every farm for weed control, and they still did some thinning from time to time.
I think in the early years, well, my grandfather had 17 acres to begin with, and we've been growing sugar beets for over 100 years now, but they used labor from neighbor kids that would come and do the work. Labor was the big thing when you started with sugar beets in the earlier years, that's for sure.
Roger, you've got a good story about an encounter with not the migrant side, but a different kind of labor. Could you tell us that story?
Which one?
The one about World War II.
Well, in World War II, labor was impossible to get, and we used prisoners of war. My dad got 5, and they were housed in the skating arena in Crookston, and you'd go and pick them up, and they'd have a bag sack lunch, and they'd work the day, and then my dad would take them back to the arena. Well, anyway, when they got through working in the spring, my dad decided to go and buy them lunch. So they went in the cafe to have lunch, and you weren't supposed to feed the prisoners. And somebody turned my dad in, and he wasn't going to get labor for the next year because he treated the labor too good. But we also, during World War II, we had what they call nationals, where they brought Mexicans in from Mexico, and they come in boxcars, and then they stayed for the entire season of sugar beets. And that was really quite an experience because they didn't speak English, and my parents and my grandfather didn't speak Spanish. And you had to get all their groceries and everything, bring to them. And another experience my dad had was during the war, he heard that he could go over to Manoman and get some Indians to help work in the beets. So he took the old truck, OK5, and went over to Manoman, and he got a bunch of workers, he thought, and brought him back to Crookston, and it was in the evening, and so they wanted him to stop and get some groceries and some blankets and things. So my dad spent $100, and so he brought him to the farm, and they were in the bunkhouse. The next morning he got up, his help was gone. They'd walk back to Manoman.
How about that story that, was it you that had that encounter with that soldier that shed a tear?
Well, we had, at one point in time, the Border Patrol came in and picked somebody up out of the field, and they drove up right up to the house. And we had a sidewalk going up to our house, and he drove right on the grass, and I was just a little guy, and I thought that was something crazy, you know, to do that, because you just didn't. But they had they did what they wanted to. And he took this guy away. But the story you're referring to is when my dad brought these German prisoners home for the first time, one guy, there was 5 of them, and they crawled out of the car, and I come out of the house, and the guy started crying. And and the tears just rolled down his face. And so I run out to my dad, and the guy looked at me, and I thought, geez, can I be that ugly? But anyway, I'm sure it brought back some memories of his home family life. And the prisoners that were here were happy to be here because nobody was shooting at them, and they knew they'd get home sometime.
Yes, thank you. So we've kind of talked about some of the beginning days of ISBI and some of the stuff with the labor. How about some of the agricultural stuff? Some of the stuff that maybe the agriculturalists here, some of the problems that you had to work with, Al, when it comes to the problems we face today of weeds and insects and diseases. What were some challenges back then?
Well, I think weed control was a really major problem. Everybody had cultivators. Band sprayers were common as well. This building here was full of equipment to manage the weed control problems. The herbicides we had were kind of make-believe herbicides. They really weren't very darn good. You go thinking of Eptam and Ronit weren't so good because you turned the soil black in the fall and it blew all winter. Endothol, well, that was a herbicide, 273, that you could kill buckwheat and so on. And the growers referred to it as Endidol because if you screwed up when you applied it, you killed most of your beets. Other herbicides you guys are familiar with. I know Alan told a story about controlling webworms. It's pretty interesting.
Well, that was one of the insect problems we had way back when, was webbed worms in them. I had with 51 Oldsmobile that I put booms on, and I was spraying the beets with that and using Endrin herbicide. And back in those days, they didn't tell us anything about careful handling and stuff. And a rabbit jumped up and ran across in front of me, and he died about 100 feet off from the road. I thought, geez, I wonder what I'm doing out here.
Yeah, the rules and regulations weren't very stringent on personal protective gear back in those days. Of course, Alan Dexter worked on weed control for 40 years plus and tested all the products that are out there. I wish we could find Antor. It was a spectacular herbicide on the pigweed species. And I think it would be a heck of an answer to the resistant water hemp that we've got today, but Tom Peters is failing at his job because he hadn't found it yet.
I was on a mission trip to Kenya, and they took me out to an experimental farm, and they were developing pigweed. And I don't remember what the heck for, but I said, geez, we spend a lot of money trying to kill it back in Minnesota. I can remember Alan Dexter, too. He came up with the idea of micro rates. And I wish I could think of his, but it was kind of almost kill them, because we'd spray them with Betamix or the different chemicals, and the weeds were evidently more susceptible to the chemicals than the beets were, and so you'd wait a week and then you'd spray them again, and you knocked the beets just about dead, and then they'd come back. And so I attribute a lot of the increase in yields that you guys have got now is to Roundup, because you're not halfway killing the crop all the time. I mean, I know they've developed better varieties, but, and if anybody's interested in some 1966 sugar beet seed, we got 3 full bags brought into the museum this winter. We did a germination test and we got 0.
So we got Tom Peters here, great weed guy for NDSU. Thank you for what you do for sugar beets. And you told me to make sure I mentioned Al Dexter. And, my first sugar beet crop was in 2018. And, it's kind of interesting because you asked me who he was, and I'm like, I don't really know who Al Dexter was. But now after hearing these stories, it's very helpful for me and meaningful to kind of understand some of the pioneers before in the science and technology of growing sugar beets. You mentioned Roundup, and it's kind of how we had to use a lot of different chemicals. We had to use micro-rates, spray them a lot. What were your thoughts as growers when Roundup first came out?
Boy, it was great. That's all I can say. We waited and waited. And I have to say this for Alan Dexter. Boy, he done an awful lot for us guys who were just trying to get weed control. And I don't know of any individual that put more into it than he did. It was always a pleasure to have him come on the farm and talk to us about our problems.
Kind of an interesting story about GMO sugar beets, weed control. Al Dexter was doing work with Liberty, glufosinate, for a number of years before he did work with Roundup. And it was within about 1 year of being labeled for sugar beets. And that summer, all of the sugar beet plants in the trials bolted. And that was the last we ever saw of Liberty Link sugar beets. But it was actually coming quite a bit before Roundup. Something went wrong in the breeding, and it wasn't too long, one of the plant breeders got let go. So.
Talking about Alan Dexter, and some of you probably remember Larry Smith that was at the Crookston Experiment Station, and I can remember at any of the reporting sessions each year, they usually had a pretty good banter going back and forth and see who could upstage the other one, and they're both retired now. But
yeah, I think about all the pieces to the puzzle for growing sugar beets, and Al here and Dexter and Larry Smith, they were the only ones that was part of this puzzle that really didn't reap the rewards from it. And I think that's forgotten a lot of times, how important part that they played in raising and moving forward with sugar beets.
Yeah, we can see sugar beets have come a long ways, and it makes me very thankful. You know, I think about the old days when my dad and my uncle grew beets. It was a lot of work then. You know, I mean, it still is now, but like compared to having the multi-germ, hands and knees, thinning out beets, it's a lot of labor. And thanks to technology and a lot of the groups here today, things have really advanced. You know, when we look at this picture behind here of this beet pile and this crane and this rail car, kind of gets me thinking about sugar beet harvest. What was sugar beet harvest like back in the old days?
What's old days?
As far back as you want to go.
Well, I can remember, this is when they were hauling beets with a truck to Eldred, and there'd be a tear man, and you dumped your truck. It was side unloading, but you got out of your box and they took a little tear. But if you was friendly with the guy that was the tear man and had maybe a little something, refreshments in your back pocket that you'd wrap the rope around and hoist it up, it was a good day.
Tear went down.
Tear went down.
well, back when it was a stock company, American Crystal tried to rule the roost as far as what machinery you got. I don't know how, if they got a kickback from certain companies, but I remember in 1946, International Harvester came out with a new drill, and several farmers in the Crookston area ordered these drills. My dad was one of them. And Al Hokelsvik came over from East Grand Forks. He was the manager of the East Grand Forks factory, and he told the NP Stone Company in Crookston to get a hold of those farmers and tell them to cancel their orders or they were going to lose their beets. And I think every one of those guys is still raising them. But they do that with the Dixie thinner when that came out. All kinds of other, I think the Milton planter too, they wanted everybody to get Milton planters.
I had a Milton planter.
That's okay.
How much did a new planter cost back in those days?
I'll tell you what a planter cost. In 1951, my dad, that's the year we started, he bought everything new. The planter was a 6-row, number 66 John Deere, if any of you remember it, $700. How many guys can do anything for $700 nowadays?
Well, my grandfather started planting beets with a Minneapolis Moline grain drill, and it was on 40-inch spacing, I think it was. So we went all the way down to 18-inch spacing for row spacing, and now we're going out, well, kind of common is 22, and up to 30 now, I guess. Some areas are going in that direction, so we're kind of making about circle.
What are some, when we look around here today, a lot of groups that weren't here back in the day. What are some groups that used to have a very prominent footprint in the sugar beet industry that maybe aren't around today?
The field man.
we had some good field men.
Yes,
Very, very good.
but they were pretty.
I think about my field man was Gundermo, for anybody who knew him. When we started the co-op, we had to go buy the stock someplace. Well, Crystal sent us all a letter. You had to go to your bank. Everybody that wanted sugar beets went to your bank, and American Crystal notified your bank what was your history of raising sugar beets, and that's what you got based on to be able to buy the stock. You bought your stock from the bank right there, and that's how that was handled. $100 a share we paid. And we had a lot of people that didn't go for it. They were scared of it. In fact, I bought some sugar beets from one of my neighbors, which says, that'll never work. Well, I says, I'm willing to bet that it'll work. And I ended up buying, this is interesting, this whole thing dragged out. And they didn't meet the deadlines for the price of buying the stock. So I got left out in the open. Crystal was very, very good to me at that time. They saw that it was a problem that they had, and they gave me a contract for just for 1 year, and I could rent the stock from American Crystal. So they helped me along a lot just because of that mistake.
How many acres was common to grow back then?
You didn't have any choice on most of it. A lot of the sugar beets were put out by the ASC office. First of all, your county ASC, and then you could apply to get to raise sugar beets. Some people got sugar beets, some didn't make it. And if you didn't make it, there was another process where you could appeal your case. And then you'd send that to the state. That's how I got mine. And the reason I didn't get it around the first time, because my brother was raising sugar beets and my dad was raising sugar beets. Somebody along the way said, nobody needs 3 sugar beet farmers in a family. So I got left out until I got down to the state, and all of a sudden the state had 25 acres. Can you imagine that? 25 acres. And I was really glad to get that. And lo and behold, the next year we had to take an acreage cut after you only have 25 acres. Yeah.
Another name hasn't been mentioned here today is Al Bloomquist. He was the executive secretary of the Beet Growers Association, and he got the idea back in the late 60s, or I think it was late 60s, that if beet growers would buy some shares of stock of American Crystal, eventually we could have enough stock that we could be represented on the board of directors. And that didn't pan out. And then in about 70, 71, he got the idea we'd buy the company, and that's what we got now, is American Crystal. Al is gone, but he had a big push on that.
Before the beet company or co-op was formed, when I graduated from high school, a farmer was retiring. He had 120 acres, and I and another neighbor, we were going to split his land and split his beet contract. And so that meant that we'd each get 60 acres of beets. And I was pretty happy about that, but when all things were said and done, I had 17 acres, and so did my friend. The field man had found another place for him. So it was kind of disappointing. You plan for something and then all of a sudden you don't have it. But that was part of the benefits of growing sugar beets.
That somewhere else he found was probably in his name. Because a lot of the fieldmen had beets of their own, and managers of American Crystal too had them.
So as we kind of are wrapping up our past section of this, which is most of what this is on today, is there any kind of last stories about the past or things you guys want to share?
I think you'd have a hard time you think you got trouble getting truck drivers nowadays. You would never get a truck driver in those days. We didn't have any hoist on the truck. Only the hoist that you had on the truck was a side dump. And the truck driver would get out of his cab, he would jerk chain, and that would let the front end loose. American Crystal's employee in the back end would click chain in the back, and then the whole side dump, just like that. And then you run it through the, I want to call it a piler. It's not a piler. It's a railroad car loader. Then you dump the load, and when you got up in it, you got done dumping, you had to be up in the box, like he said, hang a candy bar or something on there. And with that, why, everything just changed completely. I forgot my train of thought.
So when you used to haul sugar beets to the piling site, or whatever you would call it, they would hook a chain up, right, and kind of have a crane, and then you dump it sideways. And then would you get a tear pile and bring that back to the field?
No, you got a pile in your truck box, and it was up to the truck driver to get out of his truck, go up in the box, and pull the trip. So all the dump would come out of the hopper, fall down like this, and now there's 5 yards of dirt piled up against his gate. Guess what you had to do? Get out of your truck box, go up in the cab, drive it ahead a little way so you could get the gate shut, then go back in the truck again. That's what the truck driver had to do. And then when you got out to the field, I was along when you first got the very first aluminum shovel. The greatest thing. Just to shovel that dirt off.
So when you got back to the field, you had to shovel that pile out.
You had to shovel that dirt off.
Yeah.
Well, some people might, well, eventually they had loaders on tractors that they'd lift the box up.
Yeah.
My dad had a kind of an A-frame type deal out there, and a block and tackle on it, and they'd drive up alongside it, and had a little farm out tractor that they'd pull the rope, and that would raise it up. But we got DVD from Chatham Sugar Beet Factory in Chatham, Ontario, and one of the guys that shows on that DVD he had about post about this long with V's cut in both ends. And they were hauling their beets with trailers, and he'd unhook from the trailer with the tractor and then pull around to the side and put that block to the side of the trailer and then back up, and that would tip the box and you'd get the dirt off that way.
Well, thank you guys so much for your stories about, the past, and I'm sure they'll find their way into this next section. We're going to kind of take a look at today. So we want to know your guys' perspective today. So when it comes to growing a successful sugar beet crop, what do you think are the most important things to focus on?
I think American Crystal has got the greatest data bank that anything you could ever imagine. Just make sure you get your fieldman to give you all the data. There's no names on it. There's just numbers. And the only guy you know of the numbers is that number of yours that's on there. And I say, this is just what we have a saying in our farm, if you're not in that top 10%, you better be doing something wrong. You must be doing something wrong, because you're going to have to be in the top 10% to be in business in 20 years, I'm sure. In fact, I had a little bit of an experience with that. I don't know, our family got picked a year or so ago for something, and they asked me to get everything I had that was so they could take pictures of it and stuff. I had the highest recoverable sugar per acre in the Crookston area, 1980. Not a big year, but I had the highest. Last year I would have collecting insurance on that.
I've got a plaque that was given out in 1927, and I can't remember the guy's name on it, but we've got it in the museum. He got a plaque with his name on it and was awarded the highest tonnage grower of 1927. I think it's 10 ton or something like that is what he raised. And I shouldn't preach because I'm not a farmer anymore, but I think that you growers should look more at strip tilling, because it's working the ground 2, 3, 4 times in the fall, and then ridging it, and then in the spring you knock the ridges off and you plant, or you see a cover crop to keep it from blowing. If you'd strip till your fields, you got the stubble you only do it one time in the fall, and you can plant right into it in the spring. And my son got a strip tiller about 6, 7 years ago, and it really works good. I know there's getting to be more of them, but I think people are getting fed up with all this dirt blowing in the winter, and I think it'd be a good public relations, if nothing else.
I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of resistance to changing tillage practices. I've got pictures of Alan Dexter out in the field in 1972 with strip tilling trials. So strip tilling research has been going on for 45, 50 years. And the adoption's slow, but I think Alan's right. There is some issues out there that it would help to solve. But in the database that they mentioned, that Crystal database, when I was at Crystal working with Kathy, doing data mining to see what those top 10% were doing, what the top 20% were doing, and seeing if there's things we could point out to the growers in general that might be changes they could make to get into the top grower group. Because my gosh, the money invested today to grow a crop is enormous, and you can't afford to be on the bottom, and if you are, you're not going to be there for the long term. But and I see Steve's out there, and they're probably doing it already, looking at AI examination of the database to see what's new out there that weak minds like mine couldn't help to figure out back when I was at Crystal. So I see AI coming into probably usefulness in all the co-ops and on farms too.
Well, you didn't get to know what your tonnage yield was until a few weeks after the harvest was over, and you'd get it mailed to you. Now, I kind of like it, but I don't like it. If you got the code to get in, you can see how many loads, when your last load was delivered. And if it gets to be 2-3 hours, then I'm worrying about are they broke down or what's going on.
In 1951, 52, 53, we loaded a side dump in Eldon. 4 loads was all you could get. They'd send, the railroad would come in about 10:30 in the morning, and they'd come with the railroad cars, and by maybe 7, 8 o'clock or so in the next morning, all the cars were full. So then you had to sit and wait for the train to come, and that came into town about 2:30 in the afternoon. And then when the train came in, they didn't bother to spot the cars for a while, because they'd go up to the local cafe and drink coffee for a while. So we made 4 loads a day in those days. So I'm glad we did that, I guess.
Let's kind of shift gears now to kind of some of your future perspectives on things. And one question I got for you guys is, when it comes to the agronomic struggles of today, such as weeds, insects, and diseases, what are your thoughts on the future of these problems? Do you think that things are improving, things are not changing much, or things are getting worse?
Well, I think they've improved greatly. Just in the last 10 years, it's been a big improvement. And sure, we've changed tillage and we changed a few things, but I think we got to hand a lot of credit to plant breeders, and that's not only in sugar beets. This goes with wheat, soybeans, everything. That our plant breeders are just doing a great job of it.
It bothers me with these Roundup Ready lawsuits. They don't really have any proof that shows that it's cancer calling, but if we lose Roundup, I think a lot of guys are going to quit the beets, because you don't want to go back to the way we had to dam spray them and everything before.
We don't want to watch jackrabbits die next to us.
Well, it amazes me how the sugar beet industry has really changed, and how everybody's moved with that change. And nobody really likes change, but at the same token, it's part of the facts of life of being successful. And so I foresee a lot of change continuing on, and if the momentum keeps on, who knows what's going to happen.
I think an incredible change has been harvesting equipment compared to what it was just 20 years ago. When I started at American Crystal, I told Bob Levos, the VP of Ag then, you better get ready for 12-row harvesters coming. And I had some friends in the harvester industry that said they were thinking about it. Well, it came in a hurry, and then the ag staff get chewed out because turnaround times aren't good enough at the piling site, because they can load those trucks in the field and turn them around quickly. But we don't always have the piling capacity to keep up. And that harvesting equipment today, you can dig beets in conditions where you could never have dug them even 20 years ago. The equipment has improved that much. We don't want to see what happened in the north end of the valley in 2012, where they took every other set of pinch wheels off to get through the field in the mud, and then they go back over the second time and get the rows that they hadn't dug the first time. And they were plowing all the mud off the end of the field, stacking it up 6, 8, 10 feet high. We don't want to see those kinds of things. And I think the ability to harvest in a hurry now probably minimizes the chances that's going to happen as often. But harvesting equipment has come so far. And now we got these drones. There's what, at least 3 drone vendors here at the show. What's going to happen with that drone technology going forward? Ag staff and growers are going to find ways to use it. They're already using it in pile monitoring in a big way. All the co-ops, not just Crystal. So change isn't over. It's just going to keep coming.
I feel that the 2 biggest accomplishments or improvements in beet harvesters is the lifter wheels and the grab rolls. The plows like are on this 1-row International over here dug a lot of mud. The rink rolls that are in the harvester, I say only took out the dust. They just plugged all up with mud in a muddy year. And I can remember trucks coming back with, you could see the dirt above the box. The plow was so big. And now with grab rolls, it cleans your beets up really good. And I think just the lifter wheels that lifted less dirt and the grab rolls that clean them up is tremendous.
Yeah, thanks guys. And just to kind of wrap things up here, got one final question for you all. What is something that you would have told your younger self or younger farmers of any age today? We'll start here and work our way down.
When would we tell it?
Just some lasting advice, I guess, you got for anybody here today.
I can't remember what I did last week, so. Oh, golly.
I'd have probably told myself, what the hell are you doing in Sugarbeets? It interferes with all my pheasant hunting in the fall. I should have been working with barley, I guess.
Well, I think about what my grandfather told me and my dad told me, and it's an old saying is that we're not always going to have good prices and good beets. So when there is good times, save a little money for a cushion for when things aren't so good.
Delano, you got a phrase that, was it your dad or your grandpa said to you, the hardest thing about sugar beets? What's the hardest thing about sugar beets in the spring and in the fall?
Oh, I don't remember what I said.
Getting them out of the ground, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can get them out of the ground in the spring. You'll probably be all right as long as you
that's
can,
right.
as long as you can get them out of the ground in the fall.
Yeah, it's not only to get them out of the ground in the spring, in the fall, it's to get them out of the ground in the spring. And then there's another middle of the summer, you make sure they're out of the ground.
Any final things that you guys want to share?
Well, it's been very interesting. I've really enjoyed racing of the Sugarbeets. I always did, and I never was sorry. My dad, we built a new dairy barn, 1948. Started the Sugarbeets in 1951. We found out after a while that Sugarbeets and dairy don't mix all that good. Because you're putting up hay, you're putting up, trying to cultivate, you're raising corn and alfalfa and beets. They got to be taken care of. They're very quickly, and a week from now it might be too late. So this all went on, and finally my dad said one day to my brother and I, something's got to go. He says, either the cows are gone or the sugar beets are gone. Well, I sure was glad my brother spoke up, and I felt like, oh, we got to stay in the sugar beets and let the cows go.
Well, I was probably one of the only ones that had a dairy operation, and we raised sugar beets also. And I can testify to what Delano said. I should let the cows go.
I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, and that's why I'm out here. I was the oldest of 5 brothers, and I sure as heck didn't want to milk cows. So sugar beets were a better deal than dairy farming.
Well, there we have it. First off, thank you so much to our panelists. If we could give them a round of applause for that. And thank you also to the other people, the agricultural companies here today and over the years that have helped make the ISBI a great success. I think they said it was 62 or 63 years here it's been around. So it's important to note that this is the last year of ISBI being its own event, because next year it'll be combining with Bean Day. So all the stuff here today, just with the dry bean stuff. So same stuff next year, so be sure to come out and support that. Thank you also too to all the growers and various people that took time today to come and support the show. Even coming out, making a lap, shaking a couple hands, checking things out is good for everybody, so we can keep pushing forward, I guess. So with that, thank you and stay safe this growing season.
If you'd like to see what the inside of our sugar beet museum looks like, go to Mitch's YouTube site. He videoed everything inside what we got inside, and it's you might find it interesting.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, they have the Sugar Beet Museum up in Crookston. They got a display over here. If you have any old sugar beet equipment in your family or something you don't know what to do with, run it by these guys, see if they want it. Also, if you ever feel inclined to give a donation, keep the gas fresh in the engines there. I'm sure they'd appreciate that. So they'll be around here to chat and whatnot, so thanks.